At a luxury wedding, where the air hummed with the quiet clinking of crystal and the scent of 1,000 white roses, a black man in a stained chef's apron carried a tray of delicate hors d'oeuvres. He moved with a practiced ease, his presence unassuming, his expression polite, calm, and humble. He was a shadow in the corner of a brilliantly lit masterpiece, a necessary but unseen part of the grand design. The bride, a vision in white silk, turned on a heel, her smile as sharp as glass. She scowled at the man, her eyes raking over his simple uniform with disdain. "You're too loud for my wedding," she snapped, her voice cutting through the curated elegance. "Get out of my kitchen." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the nearby guests. Cameras, held by amused friends, turned to capture the little drama. The chef said nothing. He simply nodded, set down his tray, and walked away in a profound and unnerving silence. What no one in that opulent room knew, what the bride in her cloud of entitlement could never imagine, was that the same loud chef was Malcolm Reed, the millionaire owner of the global restaurant chain catering her entire event. He was also, at that very moment, the leading nominee for the Michelin Chef of the Year award. When the truth comes out, the entire room freezes, and the bride's fairy tale night turns into a global lesson in humility. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. And if this story is already hitting home, make sure you hit that like button. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore Estate in Atlanta was a universe unto itself, a swirling galaxy of glittering chandeliers, flowing champagne, and the rustle of expensive fabrics. It was a performance of wealth, meticulously staged and flawlessly executed. But just beyond the double doors, in the stainless steel heart of the mansion, the kitchen hummed with a different kind of energy. It was a world of controlled chaos, of sizzling pans and sharp commands, of steam and sweat, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. This was where the real magic happened, far from the eyes of the guests. Malcolm Reed, dressed in a simple, unadorned chef's coat, stood at its center. His apron was marked with the honest stains of his craft, a splash of raspberry coulis, a smear of truffle oil. He wasn't barking orders. His voice was a low, steady murmur, a current of calm that guided the river of activity around him. "Plate the scallops now," he said to a young line cook, his tone instructional, not demanding. "Keep the microgreens on the side until the last second. We want them crisp." The staff, a mix of seasoned professionals and eager apprentices, moved with a synchronized rhythm, their respect for him evident in their quiet efficiency. They didn't know his name was on the building, but they recognized a true leader when they saw one. He moved like a master conductor, ensuring every note in his culinary symphony was perfect. Suddenly, the kitchen doors swung open with a violent crash, slamming against the stoppers. Emily Whitmore, the bride, stood framed in the doorway, a furious goddess in a $50,000 gown. Her face, moments before a portrait of bridal bliss for the cameras, was now a tight mask of rage. The warmth and laughter of the reception hall seemed to fall away, replaced by the Arctic chill of her presence. She stormed into the prep area, her silk train dragging unceremoniously across the tiled floor. Her eyes, sharp and cold, scanned the bustling scene until they landed on Malcolm. She didn't see a leader. She saw a servant out of place. She saw a stain on her perfect day. "Who is in charge here?" she demanded, her voice shrill enough to make a waiter drop a fork with a clatter. Sophia Lang, the event planner, rushed in behind her, wringing her hands, her face pale with anxiety. She gestured weakly towards Malcolm. "This is the head chef, Emily," she stammered. "He's overseeing—" Emily cut her off with a flick of her wrist. She advanced on Malcolm, her expression one of pure disgust. "You!" she spat, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at his chest. "Who let this loud man run my kitchen?" A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. The rhythmic chop of knives ceased. The sizzle of the pans seemed to die down. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation. Malcolm hadn't been loud. His voice was the quietest in the room. But in Emily's world, his very existence, his quiet authority in her space, was an intrusive noise. He was not part of the picture she had paid for. He was a detail that was wrong, and it needed to be erased. "You are ruining my moment," she yelled, her voice echoing off the sterile steel surfaces. "This is my wedding, my night. I want pristine, silent service. I don't want this." She waved a dismissive hand, encompassing Malcolm, his simple uniform, his calm black face. Several guests, drawn by the commotion, now peered into the kitchen, their phones held up to record the spectacle. A few of them smirked, enjoying the unscheduled entertainment. It was a power play, and everyone knew who held the power. Jake Morales, a young sous chef with bright, earnest eyes, stood frozen by the plating station. He watched, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and outrage. He saw the injustice of it, the raw, ugly arrogance. Emily turned to her planner. "Get him out of here, now. I don't want to see his face again." Malcolm Reed's expression never changed. There was no flash of anger in his eyes, no tightening of his jaw. He simply held the bride's furious gaze, his own calm and unreadable. He had faced down angry critics, ruthless competitors, and the crushing pressure of a 3-star service. This was nothing. This was just revealing. He slowly, deliberately picked up a clean white cloth from the counter. He wiped his hands, each movement measured and graceful. Then he looked at Emily Whitmore, the bride, in her magnificent gown, and offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, ma'am," he said. His voice was even, betraying no emotion. It was the voice of a man who understood the situation completely. With those 2 words, he ceded the floor. He turned and walked towards the exit, his back straight, his shoulders relaxed. The cameras from the curious guests followed him, their flashes bouncing off the stainless steel refrigerators. Emily watched him go, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across her face. She had put the help in their place. She had restored order to her perfect universe. As Malcolm disappeared through the door, she let out a triumphant little laugh. No one in that kitchen, least of all Emily, understood what had just happened. They didn't know that the man she had just humiliated, the man she had thrown out of his own kitchen, was not just the caterer. He was the owner of the entire company, a culinary titan whose name was whispered with reverence in the finest restaurants from Paris to Tokyo. The quiet man in the stained apron held her perfect night, and her family's reputation in the palm of his hand. And she had just squeezed. Malcolm pushed through the service door and stepped out into the cool Georgia night. The air was a welcome shock after the humid, high-pressure kitchen. The distant, muffled sounds of the party, the elegant strains of a string quartet, the tinkling laughter of guests, seemed to belong to another world. Here, in the quiet darkness of the service alley, there was only the gentle hum of the estate's generators and the chirping of crickets. He took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of night-blooming jasmine washing over him. His expression, so carefully neutral inside, remained unreadable, a mask of professional composure. He leaned against the cool brick of the mansion, his eyes closed for a brief moment. He wasn't angry. Anger was a useless emotion, a fire that consumed the person who held it. What he felt was a profound sense of clarity, a cold, hard confirmation of a truth he had known his entire life. The kitchen door creaked open behind him. It was Jake Morales, the young sous chef. He looked flustered, his face flushed with a mixture of shame and indignation. "Chef," he began, his voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. What she did, that wasn't right. It was horrible." Malcolm opened his eyes and turned his head slightly to look at the young man. He saw the genuine distress in Jake's face, the sincere apology in his eyes. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "It's not your apology to give, son," he said, his voice calm and low. "Don't ever be sorry for the bad behavior of others." Jake shifted his weight, wringing his apron in his hands. "But she yelled at you for no reason. She humiliated you in front of everyone." Malcolm pushed himself off the wall and straightened his coat. He looked past Jake towards the faint glow of the party. People show you who they are when they think you have no power, he said, the words hanging in the still night air. They show you their true character when they believe you can't do anything about it. He placed a hand on Jake's shoulder for a fleeting moment. Go back inside. Your team needs you. Make sure the sea bass goes out perfectly. With that, he turned and began walking down the long gravel driveway, his footsteps crunching softly in the silence. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Emily, flushed with her victory, was recounting the story to her bridesmaids near the champagne tower. "You should have seen his face," she exclaimed, her voice high with glee. "He just stood there. I had to put the help in their place. You can't let them think they run the show." Her friends giggled, sipping their drinks, their laughter a chorus of casual cruelty. A few older guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, a flicker of disapproval in their eyes, but no one dared to challenge the bride on her special day. Her father, Charles Whitmore Sr., a real estate magnate with a booming voice and an air of untouchable authority, clapped his daughter on the shoulder. "That's my girl," he bellowed. "Never let anyone forget who's in charge." The message was clear. Power was their birthright, and those who served them were merely part of the scenery. Meanwhile, Malcolm had reached the end of the driveway where a fleet of sleek black catering vans was parked discreetly behind a row of manicured hedges. He stopped beside the lead vehicle. Emblazoned on the side in elegant silver lettering was a logo that would have sent a shockwave through the reception had anyone bothered to notice it. Reed Culinary Group. Global Dining Innovators. He unlocked the driver's side door and slid into the seat, the familiar scent of worn leather and clean steel a small comfort. He didn't start the engine. He simply sat in the darkness, the faint music of the party, a distant memory. He reached over and switched on the small cabin light. His fingers brushed against a letter pinned to the sun visor. The letterhead was thick, creamy paper, embossed with the iconic, globally recognized symbol of culinary excellence. The Michelin Guide. A close-up would show the key line, addressed directly to him. "We are pleased to inform you that you are a finalist for this year's prestigious Chef of the Year award." The audience now knew the secret. The man dismissed as loud, the humble chef cast out into the night, was not a servant. He was a king in disguise, and he had just been handed a declaration of war. He pulled out his phone, its screen illuminating his face in the darkness. His expression was no longer neutral. It was set, determined. A plan was beginning to form. Malcolm Reed's journey had not been paved with gold. It had been forged in fire. The narrator's voice would tell us of his beginnings, not in a pristine culinary school, but in the steamy, clattering chaos of a New Orleans dish pit. He was a boy with nothing but calloused hands and a fire in his belly, a quiet observer who learned the rhythm of a kitchen from the ground up. He watched the chefs, memorized their movements, and studied the way ingredients transformed under heat and pressure. He saw food not just as sustenance, but as a story, a language that could transcend class and color. He worked his way up, one grueling step at a time, from dishwasher to prep cook, from line cook to sous chef. He absorbed every technique, every flavor profile, every lesson in discipline. His talent was undeniable, a raw, intuitive understanding of food that couldn't be taught. But it was his work ethic that set him apart. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave, his dedication bordering on obsession. His breakthrough came when he moved to New York, a city that chewed up and spat out aspiring chefs with ruthless efficiency. He poured his life savings into a tiny 10-table restaurant in a forgotten corner of the city. He named it Hearth, a tribute to the warmth and community he believed food should create. The critics ignored him at first, another ambitious cook in a sea of them. But the people came. They came for his food, which was honest and bold and full of soul. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. A food blogger wrote a glowing review. A local newspaper followed. Then came the call that changed everything. It was the Michelin Guide. They awarded Hearth its first star, making Malcolm the youngest black chef in America to receive the honor. But he didn't stop there. He wasn't content with just one success. He began to build an empire, not with the arrogance of a conqueror, but with the quiet determination of a master craftsman. He opened new restaurants, each one a unique expression of his culinary vision. He launched the Reed Culinary Group, a company founded on the principle of respect. Respect for the ingredients, respect for the craft, and most importantly, respect for the people who did the work. He mentored hundreds of young cooks, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, giving them the opportunities he had fought so hard for. This brought him to the Whitmore wedding. The Atlanta branch of his catering division was new, and he wanted to evaluate its performance firsthand on the ground, in the heat of a high-stakes event. He believed a leader should never be too important to work the line. He wanted to see how his team operated under pressure, to understand their challenges, to lead by example. So he put on a simple chef's coat, leaving his tailored suit and his famous name behind. He wanted to be anonymous, just another member of the crew. He believed in leading from the trenches, not from a distant corporate office. But what had happened tonight with Emily Whitmore wasn't a training mistake or a logistical error. It was something far more corrosive. It was pure, unadulterated arrogance, a casual cruelty born of privilege. It was the exact opposite of everything he had built his life and his business on. As he sat in the van, the memory of her sneering face fresh in his mind, his phone buzzed, shaking him from his reverie. It was a text message from his personal assistant. The words glowed on the screen. Michelin committee confirmed. They need you at the awards ceremony in New York tomorrow night. Black tie. You are the front runner. Malcolm read the message, then read it again. A faint smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes held a different light now, the cold, clear light of an idea taking shape. The stage for his response would not be a noisy kitchen. It would be a much, much bigger one. Back inside the Whitmore mansion, the kitchen was a hive of simmering resentment. The celebratory mood of the reception hall did not penetrate these steel walls. Here the air was thick with unspoken anger. Jake Morales, having returned as instructed, moved through his tasks with a rigid, furious energy. He chopped parsley with vicious precision, each strike of his knife a small act of rebellion. He couldn't shake the image of Malcolm walking out, his dignity a silent rebuke to the bride's ugly outburst. The injustice of it burned in his gut. He saw the other staff members exchanging furtive glances, their faces tight with fear and frustration. They were all thinking the same thing, but no one dared to say it aloud. To speak up was to risk their jobs, to be blacklisted by the powerful family that employed them. Sophia, the event planner, noticed Jake's mood. She cornered him by the walk-in freezer, her expression a mixture of panic and warning. "Listen to me, Jake," she hissed, her voice low and urgent. "You need to let this go. Forget what you saw. The Whitmores are our biggest client. You'll lose your job, and I'll lose my business if you take sides. Do you understand me?" Jake stared at her, his jaw clenched. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate need to placate the wealthy and powerful at any cost. He saw a lifetime of looking the other way, of swallowing pride for a paycheck. He said nothing, simply nodding curtly before turning back to his station. But her words had the opposite effect. They didn't scare him. They solidified his resolve. As he reached for a sauté pan, his hand brushed against a small, stiff piece of cardstock in his apron pocket. He pulled it out. It was a business card he had picked up from the prep table earlier, left behind by the quiet head chef. He looked down at the name embossed in simple, elegant font. Malcolm Reed, founder and CEO, Reed Culinary Group. The name seemed to leap off the card. Jake's blood ran cold. He had heard that name before. Every serious young chef had. Malcolm Reed was a legend, a culinary icon. The man Emily Whitmore had berated and thrown out wasn't just some random agency chef. He was the Malcolm Reed, the owner of the entire company. A wave of dizziness washed over Jake as the full weight of the situation crashed down on him. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of the bride was suddenly magnified 1,000 times. She hadn't just insulted an employee, she had insulted an emperor in his own court. Meanwhile, Emily continued her victory tour of the reception. She laughed and posed for photos, blissfully unaware of the ticking bomb she had just armed. She complained loudly to anyone who would listen about the incompetent staff, embellishing the story of her kitchen confrontation with each telling. They were making so much noise it was completely unprofessional, she declared, her voice carrying across the polished dance floor. Her father, Charles Whitmore Sr., stood beside her, beaming with pride. He leaned in and whispered in her ear, his words a venomous affirmation of their shared worldview. "You did the right thing, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "You can't let the help think they're equal. Give them an inch, and they'll take a mile. You have to remind them of their place." He laughed, a deep, hearty sound that contained no humor, only the cold satisfaction of a man who believed the world was built for him and people like him. Emily smiled up at him, her validation complete. They were on top of the world, untouchable in their fortress of wealth, completely blind to the storm gathering just outside their walls. Jake Morales could not let it go. Sophia's warning and his boss's identity swirled in his mind, creating a potent cocktail of fear and duty. He felt trapped. To stay silent was to be complicit in the ugliness he had witnessed. To speak out was to risk his career, his livelihood, the very dream he was working so hard to achieve. He thought of Malcolm Reed. He thought of the quiet dignity with which the man had absorbed the insult, the calm strength he had projected even in a moment of profound disrespect. That was the kind of chef, the kind of man Jake wanted to be. He knew he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The rest of the night passed in a blur of plating and serving, but his mind was elsewhere. When the last dessert was sent out and the kitchen began its slow process of breaking down, Jake slipped away into a small, dark storage closet. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling slightly. With a deep breath, he opened his video gallery. There it was, a short, 30-second clip he had recorded instinctively when the confrontation began. He hadn't even realized he was doing it, his thumb pressing the record button as if of its own accord. He pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed from behind a stack of plates, but the audio was crystal clear. Emily's shrill, arrogant voice filled the tiny closet. "Who let this loud man run my kitchen? You're ruining my moment. Get out of here, now!" The cruelty was undeniable, stripped bare of the wedding's elegant trappings. It was raw, ugly, and indefensible. Watching it again, away from the pressure of the moment, Jake felt his fear being replaced by a cold, hard certainty. This was evidence. This was the truth. He remembered the business card still tucked safely in his pocket. He found the general contact email for the Reed Culinary Group on their website. He attached the video file to a new message. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, his heart hammering against his ribs. What should he say? He decided to keep it simple, to let the video speak for itself. He typed a short, direct message. "Chef Reed, this happened tonight. I was there. Whatever you need, whatever I can do to make this right, I've got you. Sincerely, Jake Morales, sous chef." He hit send, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the phone in his hand. He felt a surge of panic. Had he just destroyed his life? Less than a minute later, his phone buzzed. A reply. His hands shook as he opened it. The message was from a private, unlisted email address, but he knew who it was from. It contained only 3 words. 3 simple words that carried the weight of a coming storm. "Be at the ceremony." Jake stared at the screen, 1,000 questions racing through his mind. What ceremony? How did he even know who he was? But beneath the confusion, a different feeling began to take root. A sense of purpose. He didn't understand what was coming, what role he was meant to play. But he knew with absolute certainty that he had chosen the right side. Something massive was about to unfold, and he was no longer just a spectator. He was a part of it. The next morning, the sun rose over Atlanta, casting a golden glow on the manicured lawns of the Whitmore estate. Emily woke up in a sea of silk sheets, a triumphant smile already on her face. Her wedding had been, in her eyes, a resounding success. It was perfect. She reached for her phone, eager to bask in the online adoration she felt she was owed. She scrolled through the hundreds of photos posted by her guests, her smile widening with each perfectly captured moment. Then, she decided to make her own contribution. She selected a professionally shot photo of herself looking imperious and regal, her husband a handsome accessory by her side. She typed out a caption, the words flowing from a deep well of self-satisfaction. Perfection isn't about having everything. It's about knowing your place and making sure everyone else knows theirs. An unforgettable night. She hit post, imagining the wave of likes and envious comments that would surely follow. The post did go viral, but not for the reasons she expected. While her wealthy friends flooded the comments with praise and congratulations, a different kind of reaction was brewing just beneath the surface. Strangers began to comment, their words sharp and critical. "Knowing your place, what is this, the 1800s?" one user wrote. Another added, "That caption sounds incredibly elitist and out of touch." The video from the kitchen hadn't surfaced publicly yet, but her words alone were enough to strike a nerve. Her tone was a lightning rod for criticism. Emily scrolled through the negative comments, her initial amusement curdling into annoyance. She showed the phone to her father over a lavish breakfast on the veranda. "Look at this," she huffed. "Can you believe the nerve of these people? They're just jealous." Charles Whitmore Sr. barely glanced at the screen. He let out a dismissive chuckle. "Emily, don't waste your energy on the opinions of nobodies," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "No one important cares what they think. They don't live in our world. Let them squeal." He was right, she thought. Their opinions were irrelevant. Their small, insignificant lives had no bearing on hers. She put the phone down, her confidence restored by her father's words. Their focus was already on the next event, an even grander display of their status and influence. That night they were flying to New York City for the annual Michelin Gala. Whitmore Properties was one of the event's primary sponsors, a fact Charles had made sure was prominently displayed on all the promotional materials. It was a perfect opportunity for Emily to make her debut as a newly married socialite, to flaunt her new life on a national stage. She spent the rest of the day planning her outfit, coordinating with her stylist, and dreaming of the flash bulbs and fawning reporters. She imagined herself on the red carpet, the embodiment of grace and power. The irony, so thick and heavy it was almost suffocating, was completely lost on her. She was eagerly, excitedly, flying directly into the eye of the hurricane she had created. She didn't realize that the man she had so casually dismissed was about to be honored on that very stage, in front of the entire world she was so desperate to impress. The stage for her reckoning was set, and she was rushing to take her front row seat. While Emily Whitmore was choosing between diamonds and pearls, Malcolm Reed was in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. The space was minimalist and modern, a reflection of the man himself. It was a place of quiet focus, not opulent display. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a sleek, uncluttered living area. There were no awards on the walls, no trophies on the shelves. The only testament to his success was the view, a sprawling panorama of the city that had once tried to break him. He stood by the window, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and gray trousers, a phone held to his ear. His posture was relaxed, but his focus was absolute. He had spent the morning making arrangements, coordinating with his team, and setting the pieces on the board. Now it was time for the final, decisive move. He dialed a single number, a private line he rarely used. It was answered on the first ring. Dupont, a crisp professional voice with a faint French accent said. Miss Dupont, it's Malcolm Reed, he replied, his own voice calm and even. There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice warmed considerably. Malcolm, we were hoping you'd make it. The committee is thrilled. We weren't sure if you'd be back from Atlanta in time. My plans changed, Malcolm said simply, a hint of steel beneath the placid surface of his tone. I'll be there tonight. Wonderful. We'll have your credentials waiting for you at the VIP entrance. Thank you, Malcolm said. There is one small favor I'd like to ask, if it's not too much trouble. For you, Malcolm? Anything. What is it? He turned from the window, his eyes cold and sharp, like chips of obsidian. He pictured Emily Whitmore's smug, triumphant face. He pictured her father's dismissive laugh. The Whitmore family. They're one of your sponsors, I believe. I need to be sure they have a good view of the stage. He let the request hang in the air for a moment before adding, Please make sure the Whitmore table has front-row seats. Ms. DuPont sounded slightly confused by the specific request, but she didn't question it. Of course. Table 1, right at the front. Consider it done. We'll see you tonight. Yes, Malcolm said, a chilling finality in his voice. You will. He hung up the phone and set it down on a polished marble counter. The stage was set. Every actor was in place. He walked into his bedroom and opened the doors of a large custom-built closet. Inside, rows of impeccably tailored suits hung in perfect order. He selected a classic black tuxedo, the fabric so dark it seemed to absorb the light. He laid it carefully on the bed. Then he opened a small, leather-lined drawer and took out a pair of simple, elegant cufflinks. They were made of brushed platinum, unadorned except for a small, deeply engraved inscription on each one. He ran his thumb over the letters, a silent ritual he performed before every major event. The words were a reminder of his journey, a summary of his entire philosophy, a quiet promise to the boy he had once been. Earned, not given. He held them in his palm, the cool metal a comforting weight. Tonight was not about revenge. Revenge was a messy, emotional affair. This was about something else entirely. This was about justice. It was about rebalancing the scales. And he was going to do it his way, quietly, deliberately, and with devastating precision. That evening, the air outside the historic New York auditorium buzzed with an electric energy. A long, plush red carpet snaked its way to the grand entrance, flanked on both sides by a chaotic wall of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Limousines pulled up one after another, depositing the culinary world's elite into the dazzling sea of light. The Whitmores arrived in a black Rolls-Royce, stepping out into the heart of the storm. Charles Sr. beamed, waving to the cameras as if he were royalty. Emily, dressed in a glittering backless gold gown, soaked in the attention, her smile wide and practiced. She felt powerful, important exactly where she belonged. They posed for photos, Charles with a proprietary arm around his daughter, their faces a picture of wealth and influence. They were completely oblivious, two actors in a play who had never read the final act. Inside, the ballroom was even more spectacular than their own. The theme was celestial, with thousands of tiny lights twinkling from the ceiling like stars and deep blue velvet draping the walls. The most important figures in the global food scene were all there. Legendary chefs, influential critics, and wealthy patrons of the culinary arts. The Whitmores were shown to their table number 1, positioned directly in front of the grand stage. Emily preened, seeing the prime location as a confirmation of her family's superior status. "See, Daddy?" she whispered. "Everyone knows who's important here." Not far away, near the back of the vast room, Jake Morales stood by the staff's designated table. Malcolm had arranged for him to be there, flying him to New York and giving him a crisp new suit. He felt completely out of place, a small boat adrift in a vast ocean of power. He nervously straightened his tie for the 10th time, his eyes scanning the crowd, his heart pounding with a nervous anticipation that was almost unbearable. He had no idea what Malcolm was planning, but he could feel the tension in the air, a gathering storm waiting to break. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. The host walked onto the stage, and the ceremony began. Awards were given for Best New Restaurant, for Innovation in Pastry, for Lifetime Achievement. The Whitmores clapped politely, their attention only half engaged. They were waiting for the main event, the part of the evening sponsored by their company. Finally, the host returned to the podium. "And now," he announced, his voice booming through the sound system, "for the most prestigious award in the culinary world, the Michelin Chef of the Year." A drum roll began. The massive screens on either side of the stage lit up, showing a montage of the nominees. A stern-faced chef from France, a smiling culinary artist from Japan, a revolutionary cook from Spain. The final nominee appeared on the screen. It was a candid shot of a man in a simple chef's coat, his face focused, his hands expertly plating a dish. The name appeared in bold white letters: Malcolm Reed. At that exact moment, the side doors of the auditorium opened and a figure walked in. He moved with a quiet, confident stride, not towards a table, but directly towards the stage. It was Malcolm Reed. He wasn't in a chef's coat now. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, the one he had laid out that afternoon. He looked poised, powerful, and utterly in command. A ripple of applause started, quickly growing into a wave, then a thunderous roar. The entire room, hundreds of the most respected figures in his industry, rose to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation. They were applauding a master, a titan, a king. Emily Whitmore, who had been lazily sipping her champagne, froze. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. She stared at the man walking towards the stage, her mind struggling to process what her eyes were seeing. The suit was different, the setting was different, but the face was the same. It was the face of the man she had called too loud. It was the face of the man she had thrown out of her kitchen. Her smug smile, which had been plastered on her face all night, began to falter. It trembled, then collapsed entirely. Her jaw dropped and the color drained from her face, leaving behind a sickly pale mask of disbelief and dawning horror. The host on stage let the applause wash over the room before raising his hand for silence. He beamed, a look of genuine admiration on his face. "It seems our final nominee needs no introduction," he said with a chuckle. He tore open the sealed envelope in his hand. The drum roll intensified, a frantic, heart-pounding rhythm that seemed to echo Jake's own pulse. The entire room held its collective breath. At table 1, Charles Whitmore Sr. was staring at Malcolm, his jovial expression replaced by a deep, confused frown. Emily was completely still, a statue carved from ice. She looked from Malcolm on the stage to the giant screen showing his face, then back again. It wasn't possible. It was a nightmare. The host's voice boomed from the speakers, sealing her fate. "And the 2025 Michelin Chef of the Year is Malcolm Reed." The room erupted. The applause was deafening, a physical force that shook the very foundations of the building. Confetti cannons exploded, showering the stage in a cascade of glittering gold and silver. Cameras flashed, their brilliant strobes all focused on one man. On the giant screens, the cameras zoomed in not on Malcolm, but on the front table. They zoomed in on the pale, shell-shocked faces of Emily and Charles Whitmore. Their confusion and horror were broadcast for the entire world to see. Malcolm walked calmly onto the stage, shaking the host's hand and accepting the heavy, prestigious award. He stepped up to the podium, the applause slowly fading as he prepared to speak. He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze sweeping over the adoring crowd until it landed, for just a moment, on table 1. His expression was calm, composed, almost serene. "Thank you," he began, his voice smooth and steady, amplified throughout the silent hall. I am truly humbled. To be recognized by this committee among such incredible talent is the honor of a lifetime. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. I was taught that the food we make tells a story. It tells the story of the farmer who grew the vegetables, the fisherman who caught the fish, and the cook who seasons the pot. It's a story of hard work, of dedication, and of respect. He looked directly at the Whitmore table now. Emily felt his gaze like a physical blow. But I've learned that you can tell a much more important story, not by looking at a person's plate, but by watching how they treat the person who is serving them. A murmur went through the crowd. A few people exchanged confused glances. What was he talking about? You can tell everything about a person's character, Malcolm continued, his voice dropping slightly, drawing the audience in, by how they behave when they believe no one of consequence is watching. And then it happened. The screens behind him, which had been showing his smiling face, suddenly flickered and changed. The shaky, poorly lit video from Jake's phone filled the massive screens. Emily's shrill voice, distorted and ugly, echoed through the ballroom's perfect sound system. Who let this loud man run my kitchen? You're ruining my moment. Get out of here! The entire room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Jaws dropped. Hundreds of eyes darted from the screen to Emily, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The video showed Malcolm standing there calmly, absorbing her tirade. It showed the smirking guests in the background, their phones held high. It showed her smug, triumphant smile as he walked away. The contrast between the celebrated genius on the stage and the humble servant on the screen was devastating. When the clip ended, the silence that followed was heavier and more damning than any booing could ever have been. The world had seen her true face. There was nowhere left to hide. The silence in the grand ballroom lasted only a moment, but for Emily Whitmore, it stretched into an eternity. It was a thick, suffocating blanket of judgment. Then the dam broke. The low murmur of the crowd swelled into a wave of shocked whispers. Reporters, sensing the biggest story of the night, broke from their designated areas and swarmed towards the front. Emily, her face ashen, pushed her chair back violently. It screeched against the polished floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. She had to get out. She stood up, her legs trembling, and tried to rush for the exit. But it was too late. A wall of cameras and microphones blocked her path. Emily, is it true? A reporter shouted, shoving a microphone in her face. Did you really say that to Chef Reed? Another voice cut in, sharp and accusatory. Do you have any comment on the video? Do you regret your comments, Ms. Whitmore? Is that how the Whitmore family treats its staff? The questions came like machine gun fire, relentless and brutal. Emily froze, a deer caught in 100 blinding headlights. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked desperately to her father, but he was just as stunned, his face a mottled shade of red and white, his usual blustering confidence completely gone. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Before the night was even over, Charles Whitmore Sr.'s phone began to buzz incessantly. Major corporate partners, seeing the PR nightmare unfolding on live social media feeds, were pulling out. The sponsorship deals he had so carefully cultivated over decades were evaporating in minutes. His company, built on an image of prestige and power, was now inextricably linked to an act of petty, ugly cruelty. Sophia Lang, the event planner who had told Jake to stay silent, was watching the ceremony from home. She immediately began typing a frantic public apology on her company's social media page, a desperate attempt to distance herself from the Whitmores and save her business from the toxic fallout. She threw Emily under the bus without a second thought, claiming she was appalled by her client's behavior. Back on the stage, Malcolm Reed raised his hand again for silence. The crowd, eager to hear what he would say next, quieted down. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't used a single angry word. He had simply held up a mirror, and the reflection had done all the work. True leadership, he said, his voice ringing with quiet authority, isn't about shouting orders. It's about inspiring respect. And true strength is often found in the quietest places. He then looked towards the back of the room, his eyes finding Jake Morales, who was standing frozen, his heart in his throat. Malcolm smiled, a genuine, warm smile. There was a young man in that kitchen who saw what happened. He had every reason to stay silent, to protect his job, to look the other way. But he chose to do what was right, not what was easy. He held up his award. I want to publicly thank Jake Morales. This young man reminded me that there is still courage and integrity in our kitchens. He beckoned for Jake to come forward. A spotlight swung to the back of the room, finding the stunned young sous chef. The entire audience turned to look at him, and this time the applause that erupted was for him. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated approval. Malcolm's staff, who had been watching from the catering section, let out a massive cheer. Jake, his face flushed, slowly walked towards the stage, his life changed forever in that single moment. As he walked past table 1, he saw Emily burst into tears, her body shaking with great gulping sobs of humiliation. The crowd, which had moments before been staring at her, now turned away, their attention focused on the young man who had chosen courage over silence. Her public execution was complete. In the weeks that followed the Michelin Gala, the world continued to turn, but the orbits of those involved had been permanently altered. The video of Emily's tirade, now professionally edited alongside Malcolm's speech, became a viral sensation, a global cautionary tale about arrogance and respect. The Whitmore name, once a symbol of Atlanta society and business prowess, became synonymous with entitlement and disgrace. Charles Whitmore Sr.'s real estate empire suffered massive financial blows as partners and clients deserted them in droves. Their social invitations dried up, and they became pariahs in the very world they had once so effortlessly dominated. Their fall was as swift as it was brutal. Malcolm Reed, however, used his newfound platform not for self-aggrandizement, but for positive change. He didn't revel in the Whitmore's downfall. Instead, he turned the spotlight away from their failure and onto the promise of a better future. He announced the creation of a major new culinary scholarship fund, designed specifically to help underprivileged students from marginalized communities attend the world's top cooking schools. He named it the Eleanor Reed Foundation, after his late mother. In a widely circulated interview, he told her story. He spoke of how she had worked 2 jobs as a cleaning lady to support him, how she had scrubbed the floors of wealthy homes with quiet dignity, and how she had always told him that the true measure of a person was how they treated those who could do nothing for them. Jake Morales became the foundation's first success story. Malcolm took the young chef under his wing, making him the new head of training for the entire Reed culinary group. Jake, who had been terrified of losing his job, was now traveling the world, teaching the next generation of chefs the principles of skill, respect, and integrity. He was living a dream he never thought possible, his single act of courage having opened a door to a new life. He was a testament to Malcolm's belief in rewarding character as much as talent. The quote from Malcolm's speech trended worldwide for weeks, appearing on everything from social media memes to inspirational posters. Greatness doesn't need permission to be heard. It became a rallying cry for service workers, for anyone who had ever felt invisible or disrespected. It was a simple, powerful message that resonated deeply in a world increasingly tired of empty noise. Malcolm had not only won an award, he had started a global conversation about the nature of true power and respect. He had shown that the quietest voice in the room could, in the end, be the most powerful one of all. In a world obsessed with titles, with fame, with the glittering illusion of appearances, it is easy to mistake the loudest voice for the most important one. We are taught to look for power in the corner office, on the grand stage, in the expensive suit. But true power, the kind that endures, doesn't shout for attention. It doesn't need to announce its own arrival. True power serves. It builds. It lifts others up. It understands that humility is not weakness, but the quiet, confident foundation upon which all great things are built. And when arrogance, in its blindness, decides to mock that quiet humility, it unknowingly sets the stage for its own downfall. Justice, in the end, always finds its moment. It always finds its stage. It may not be today, and it may not be tomorrow, but the scales will always eventually find their balance. The final shot is not of a trophy or a red carpet. It is of a simple kitchen, alive with the purposeful energy of creation. And at its heart stands Malcolm Reed, wearing a clean white apron. He is instructing a young scholarship student, his voice calm and steady, his hands guiding hers as she plates a dish. He looks up and smiles, a quiet, knowing smile. He is back where he belongs, not as a celebrity, but as a chef. The man who was once called too loud had become the loudest, most respected name in culinary history, not by raising his voice, but by elevating his craft and his community. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.